Okay, well, the first part I want to look into is what is history? Now, most people are going to say that history is just a narrative of what happened in the past, a story, which they are correct. It is a story, and a story is the best way to really convey what happened in the past. Many of you have probably read a book or watched a TV show or movie. It's put forth in some sort of story pattern. Now, history is a bit more than just a story about the past. What history is, and this is derived off of the ancient Greeks. Their word for history is historia, which actually means investigation of the past. And so they look, for example, at what happened in the past. They investigate different sources. For example, they try to, hopefully, they're not always able to do so, look at an event from many different sides. Could be the victor, could be the loser, the people in between, could be civilians, military officials, politicians, so on and so forth. In that way, they are able to get a full picture of what happened, and then they can convey or analyze this information to come to some sort of conclusion. For example, to learn lessons from the past, what to do, what not to do, what to be careful of, so on and so forth. So this comes out with the phrase of learning from the past to hopefully not repeat the mistakes of the past in the future. And there's many variations of this phrase I'm sure you've heard of from time to time. So that really is what history is to many historians and certainly to myself. And in history, and certainly in my classes, I try to convey that we're looking at different perspectives. We're not just taking it from an American-centric view, meaning basically how Americans view the world, but also try to pull in what the Europeans or the Middle East, the Chinese, and so on are doing and how they portray the actions that are happening around the world. Now, the main point of history is also to be informed of different issues and different perspectives. So it's a rather balanced view of the world through the past as well. Typically, history is a generation away because if we were to tell the history, for example, of 9/11, there are still quite a few people, myself included, who remember those events, who may have some biases, which may be unknown to the particular individual, but we really can't say exactly what happened around 9/11. Yes, we know a couple planes slammed into the World Trade Center, but there's a bunch of moving parts that happened before the event, during the event. Much of this information, for example, is classified, so we really can't have an analytical study of the events of 9/11 until maybe 50 some years after the fact. That way, one, we can know for sure what the consequences are. Certainly some wars have been taking place after those events, but we're not entirely 100% of the outcome. So in my particular view, you have to take a step back 50 years to really study history. So at this point, we can, for example, look at the Vietnam War, but not really much afterwards. That is more in the realm of political science or journalism. So I don't really comment on those events 50 years afterwards as history. That may be my own particular style, but regardless, that's how I view it. But in my classes, and certainly with the study of history, I want to inform the public of where people came from, what were their values, looking at different perspectives on history. This really calls into critical thinking as well. And hopefully that'll be conveyed in this class as well. Because historians ask questions. Much like any of us, if we're interested in a topic, we want to know different aspects. So in history, we will ask, for example, why did this event happen at this particular time? How were the poor treated? How were the rich treated? How were they all affected? What were the consequences of these events? For example, let's say the French Revolution. How were the poor affected, how were the rich affected, what were the effects for both sides, what is the aftermath, what is the long-term impact and short-term impact of the French Revolution, and some people might ask, is it still going on? Of course, we'll deal with that when the time comes. So we'll start many of these lectures, for example, with questions and work our way into it and try to address all these different events with a question first, and then try to explore that question to answer it in that fashion. So my main point with my history classes is to inform you on what was going on at the time, and certainly some of the impacts that may have impacted them during that period of time, but also us eventually, even to this current day. So hopefully you enjoy that approach. And so we'll move into the first lesson.